I have been making music and using MPK Mini MIDI controllers for a long time. I've seen the build quality increase over the years. They've even added sounds to some. They've released it in different colorways. I've created custom MPK minis. And they've pretty much been a staple in the home studio music community, the music producer community in general, for years, as long as they've been making them. I mean, look, this one's a little dusty. Look how sick this all black MPK Mini Play is with the Vader sticker, everything. But today I'm going to show you a brand new MPK Mini. An MPK Mini unlike those that came before. An MPK Mini with more keys, MIDI ports, and transport control. And it's even got a sequencer. Ladies, gentlemen, and NBs, I give you the MPK Mini Plus. I'm going to break down some of the features of this controller and talk about whether or not you should consider buying one. Spoiler alert, it's not a clean yes. Alright, so out of the box, the Akai Mpk Mini Plus has a great build quality. It's the same build quality we've come to expect from the latest iteration of the MPK Minis. Since the Mark III version of the MPK Minis, they have sort of upped the design, upped the build quality from previous iterations, upgraded the pads to full-on MPC pads. It is made of plastic, but just feels a bit more solid, and it's got that classic design. It's everything you'd expect from an MPK Mini. Of course, I mentioned this at the top, but new to the MPK Mini line is access to these MIDI ins and outs. We have 5-pin MIDI in and out, as well as clock in and out with CV and gate ports here, and then the standard sustain and USB port as well. Interestingly, we still have the iconic, I guess, MPK Mini joystick here, but we have hardware pitch and mod wheels. The pitch bend is as you'd expect. It reacts and goes back to center position when you use it. Mod, not so much, just goes up and down and stays where you left it. Why do we have both of these wheels and this joystick? I'm not sure. I've talked about this in previous MPK Mini reviews, but the joystick is not my favorite aspect of the MPK Mini, though you have seen me using it in some performances, using it as sort of a pitch bend and maybe a guitar bending style, but now I can just use this pitch wheel, so maybe we'll have fun with mapping the joystick. And if I plug it in with USB, we will see this thing start to light up. And our pads remain on and backlit. Hopefully you can see that. Maybe if I lower this light a little bit, you'll see it better. Check that out. We've got green pads there. I think you can see that now. And these, of course, will change depending on different modes. For instance, if I hold Program Select and go into the Ableton Live mode, now they're backlit yellow. Different modes, different color combinations. And you can see that we are making use of this teeny tiny screen, which we're actually making a lot more use out of here on the MPK Mini Plus, which I'll talk about in a bit. We also have the addition of some other function buttons that you'll see, including scales and chords mode. Of course, there's some shift functionality that helps us access the CV setup as well as other MIDI functions. And then here, which is most exciting, is we have a bit of transport controls. We have like a forward and backward arrow, stop, play, record, and a play stop button for the sequencer, which we will of course get into checking that out as well. So it truly is like MPK Mini Plus. It's got all the good stuff of the proper MPK Mini plus a little bit more. Transport control, sequencer, MIDI out, all that good stuff. And since we've got it already plugged into the computer, before we get into some of the MIDI functionality, let's just quickly test some of the new transport functionality in our DAW. Okay, so I use the DAW Ableton Live, but as I alluded to before, if we hold Program Select and we select one of these pads, you will see on the screen that different DAWs are reflected. So we essentially have different templates to control different DAWs like MPC, GarageBand. There's a chromatic and a major and minor pad mode. We'll get into that in a minute. Ableton Live, Logic Pro, FL Studio. So a lot of the major DAWs are there and represented. But in Ableton Live, all I have to do is go to Live, MIDI Preferences, make sure that the right control surface is selected, and we should be good to go with some of these new transport controls. Of course, if I arm a drum instrument, it will work with our pads. And if I arm a synth instrument, melodic, harmonic, it will control. That's what we expect. But newly added here on the MPK Mini Plus are the transport controls. So we can play our project. You can see that activated play. We can stop our project. We can record. And these arrows here help us move the playhead. If the project is not playing, we can choose where it will play from. Let's play from bar 2. If the project is playing, we can skip ahead further, or we can go in reverse backwards. This is by all means the bare minimum when it comes to transport controls. There are a lot of other controllers that are a lot more thoughtful and a lot more useful, frankly, with their transport controls and their DAW control. I'll talk about that later in the video. But sure, we have play, stop, and record, and we have forward and backward arrows. Great. And of course the encoders, since we are in the Ableton Live template mode, if I select an audio effect rack, we get that little blue hand next to the title, and our encoders here will automatically adjust some of the parameters there. So let's just turn on a big reverb. Got some highs. Got some lows. And we have hands-on control with the encoders. We can use the pads for things other than drums. For instance, if we go Program Setup and select the major pad mode, we get a major scale. 2 octaves worth of a major scale. And Program Select minor pad mode, of course, we get a minor scale. Not only can we lock our pads into a scale, but we can also lock our keys into a scale. So I've engaged the scale mode, which now means that any key that I press on this keyboard will correspond to the selected scale. So you hear that these 2 keys are the same note. That's because it's locking us to C major. There's no wrong notes in this mode. And if I hold Shift, Config, we can change the root note of that scale. We can change whether it's major or what mode it's in. And your keyboard will be essentially locked in to only correct notes for that scale. For beginner musicians, I would highly recommend you just learn your scales. I've got a great music theory tutorial that makes it so easy for you to learn and just have all that knowledge in your head rather than relying on a scale mode. But maybe it's good for some beginners just to get up and running. I do think it is useful in conjunction with the chords mode though, because this is pretty fun. So if I hold Shift and Config on chords mode, we actually have different type of chords available to us. We have a basic triad, 1, 3, 5. We can also add a 7, a 9, and then different types of chords here. Major 7, minor 7, dominant. We can create chord progressions in key. When I'm engaged in this mode, the pads still play whatever mode they're assigned to. And same deal in the chords mode. Aside from just changing the chords, you can also change what scale mode you're in. You can also change the inversion, which is nice. An easy way to tap in chords. Of course, we do have 37 keys now, so if you do want to play some of these chords yourself, it's just a lot easier with 37 keys. I really like the 37 key length for a keyboard. It's actually one of my favorite form factors. Not too big, but I can still play full extended chords. Okay, so transport control, built-in scale, chord functionality, but what about some of these MIDI ports using it with outboard gear? Let's get into that. Okay, so let's test the Akai Mpk Mini Plus's MIDI functionality with my Lemon Drop Nano Box synth. I love this synth. It's a little granular synth. I've got a video on that talking about why I love it. And let's just go ahead and plug this thing in to the Akai Mpk Mini. Hey, sorry to interrupt the video real quick here, but I just want to let you all know that if you're enjoying the vibe of this channel, consider subscribing or at least giving the video a like. In addition to my gear review videos. I do lots of performances with different controllers and gear. I also do lots of live streaming here, and we've got an awesome community. So consider subscribing. If you want to support the channel, you can click join and become a member, which gets you access to our exclusive Discord community, as well as members only content. And it's one of the things that keeps the channel going. So sorry for the interruption. Thank you for watching this video. Let's get back into it. Let's power the lemon drop. And no sound. Why? Well, I troubleshooted this. I thought it was maybe on the wrong MIDI channel or something, and it's because my MPK Mini Plus is being powered by the computer. If I unplug the USB from the computer connection and I plug it into just an external power bank, however, we're in control. If you can't already hear why I love this little lemon drop synth, then maybe it's just not for you. So yes, we're fully in control of the synth here. Which is great to be doing from an MPK Mini. We've never been able to do this from an MPK Mini before. If you'll notice, as I press the pads here, we're not getting any sound, and that's because the pads are by default sending to MIDI channel 10, which I guess is sort of the standard for MIDI drums, which also comes into play when using the sequencer. So let me just change sounds here on the lemon drop real quick. Let's find more of just a piano type sound. All right, so the sequencer, I kind of talked about this before, but the MPK Mini Plus is doing a lot with this little screen when it comes to the sequencer, and there's two modes for the sequencer. Not really two modes, but two screens you can be in, I guess. We have step edit and live sequencer. So if I hold shift and octave down, that gets us into the step edit mode. Now in this mode, we can select what step we're on. We can select the time division. Currently it's on eighth notes. We can select the length of the sequence, we can transpose, we can change our MIDI channel, and it will also tell us how many notes are on each step. The maximum is 8. So as I put notes here while I'm in step edit mode, if I press a note, keys changes to 1, and we also get a little diagram of the keyboard that shows us what note is playing. So as we go through, let's actually shorten this length to 8 so it's a bit easier. As we go through steps, let's go to step 2, step 3, pressing a note again will take it off of the step, and then we're back to 1. So now we've put a note on each of these steps. You can put up to 8 notes. Let's go ahead and hit play on the sequence. And now we've got a sequence going. Now if we hold shift, we get access to things like gate for each note. We can change the swing. We can also change the BPM. It's also worth noting there, as we're holding this shift functionality, a lot of the MIDI functions are shared with the arpeggiator. So you would change the BPM for the arpeggiator, you would change the swing for the arpeggiator. But we're doing it for the sequencer, we're doing it for our sequence, and it still says ARP setup. So that could be a little confusing for people. And if you're like me, you will constantly hit the regular transport play and stop instead of the sequence play and stop. I guess I'll just have to get used to that. Okay, but I said there's two modes for the sequencer. Let's go into live sequence. While I'm in live sequence, whatever I play on top of this pattern will get recorded on top of the sequence. And in this live sequence mode, we get access to a lot of the same parameters we had in the previous mode. We can change the time division, we can change the length of the sequence, it'll tell us the keys per step. And if our sequence is above 16 steps, we can go all the way up to 16 steps. It's just in pages in increments of 16. It is in this live sequence mode that we get access to some options for the pads. So the pads are currently set to live, and they're sending on channel 10. So we're not hearing anything because our Lemon Drop synth is receiving from MIDI channel 1, which is what our keys are sending. So if you had a drum machine, it would just send out to a drum machine. But we can play live on a sequence, go through just like we did with the keys on each step. Now, of course, we would normally be doing this with a drum machine, so it makes a little bit more sense. But the other mode here in live sequence is step. So this works more like you might expect for a traditional step sequencer. And in step edit mode, we can go ahead and turn off some of these notes, or similarly to how we were doing before, put notes on a different step. I don't love this. It's not always clear what you're sequencing when you're in the live sequence mode on pads. Sure, the pads illuminate and we get a little grid here on screen. But I guess what I expected is to have a more visual representation of what the step sequencer is doing, as we've seen in other gear with step sequencers, where it's sort of scrolling through time on the pads, and we have two banks here, so we could utilize both banks. So yes, we've got a step sequencer here. Yes, you can sequence up to 64 steps. You can change time division. You can transpose it on the fly. I would have hoped for maybe just a little bit more. Like, it would be great to be able to program multiple sequences and switch between them, so you could have a little bit of a song mode. I'm not sure how difficult that is from a memory standpoint. I don't think storing regular old MIDI information is that difficult, but imagine a world where you could program a sequence and we use these pads to sort of launch the different sequences, sequence A, sequence B, sequence C, and then you could sort of create full songs with just the MPK Mini Plus and an external synth. I don't have any gear that uses CV, and quite frankly, I'm not a synth person. So if you are watching this video, if you can add some context in the comments for maybe some of the capabilities for those ports, or maybe some things that I'm not seeing possibilities with MIDI and external gear, would love for you to add context down below in the comments. And to just revisit our joystick friend here again, I've got pitch bend and mod, as you might expect, which, you know, are automatically mapped to different parameters depending on the preset of the synth. And the joystick, which would normally do pitch, wheel, and mod, not doing anything currently. So I guess that is just available for mapping, which with a synth like the Lemon Drop is kind of easy. For instance, I've just quickly mapped the filter and reverb to the joystick. Could be some fun to have with that. I won't give the joystick too much of a hard time. But now that we've kind of seen a lot of the newer features of the Akai Mpk Mini Plus and what makes it stand out from previous MPK Minis, let me give you my final thoughts. Should you buy this thing? Who is it for? I have some opinions. All right, so should you buy yourself an MPK Mini Plus? Well, it's complicated. And before we start answering that question, I just want to say I've done a lot of MIDI controller reviews. If you see a MIDI controller that you just like and it doesn't have every box checked, if on paper another piece of gear is better than the piece of gear that you want, that's okay. We don't have to make all of our gear decisions based on which piece is logically the best one. You can just say, hey, I like the way that one looks, or I just like the vibe of that piece of gear, and go for it. That being said, we do have a bit to talk about with the MPK Mini Plus and its competition. First of all, I think one of the reasons people like MPK Minis are for their portability, and they're just like overall a great utilitarian controller. Now with the MPK Mini Plus, we lose a bit of that portability. Will it still fit in a backpack? Maybe if it's tall enough, but I guess if you're going for 37 keys, maybe portability isn't your biggest priority. And perhaps you might say, well, it's a mini keyboard with MIDI out. Well, it's not the only one. We have a much more portable option in the Launch Key Mini, which does have a MIDI out port. Even though you need a dongle for it, it is still a useful controller with MIDI out. It's even slimmer than the actual MPK Mini. So in terms of portability, probably not your best option. So if you're more likely to just use this at home and it's going to live on your desk, you might say, well, it's a good upgrade from my original MPK Mini because it's got the transport controls. Maybe you like the pitch and mod wheels, plus, of course, the MIDI out and sequencer. Well, if that's the case, you might consider going for a bigger keyboard. Not to be like a Novation fanboy here for a minute, but I do love the Launch Key 37 for this case. Now, obviously, this is quite a bit bigger, but remember, we've sort of departed from caring about portability at this point. Now, of course, this is going to benefit Ableton Live users the most, but I do want to put a little pressure on Akai and go back to what I was saying about the transport controls. They've done the bare minimum with the transport controls here on the MPK Mini Plus. They need to do more. I say this because the Launch Key 37's transport controls go above and beyond. We have play, stop, and record. We also can turn loop on and off, but then there's 4 other functions that I think could be used in most other DAWs. We have an undo button. I love having an undo button. We have a metronome on and off button. We have a quantize button. And then we have a capture MIDI button, which is probably Ableton Live specific. But adding those 4 additional functions in addition to play, stop, and record is a million times better because, yes, while the Mini Plus has some transport controls, the more I have to touch my mouse, the more I'm less likely to use the controls on the actual keyboard. So if my recording process is play, start recording, stop, quantize that, or undo that, record again, I can do that all without touching my computer on the Launch Key 37. On the Mini Plus, sure, I can play, stop, and record, but if I want to undo, if I want to quantize, I have to touch the mouse anyway, so why not just click play, stop, and record? I don't know. Okay, but what about the sequencer? So I talked about my take on what's going on with the sequencer here on the MPK Mini Plus, but there's another 37 key controller you might consider, which is the Arturia KeyStep 37. These controllers are very similar apart from the fact that the Akai Mpk Mini Plus does have the MPC pads. There are no pads on the Arturia, and we do have 8 endless encoders on the MPK Mini Plus. So it syncs up with the DAW a bit better than the KeyStep 37. I think if you're more of a hardware person and you're looking to control hardware, the KeyStep 37 approaches, especially the sequencer angle, in a lot more intuitive way than the MPK Mini Plus. For instance, it's got these LED lights above each key, which illuminate when that note is present in the sequence. A lot of the tried and true sequencer functionality are built into both. I think the KeyStep 37 goes a little further though, and just having those LEDs alone makes it a bit more user-friendly. You can tell a bit more what's going on versus looking at the teeny tiny screen on the MPK Mini Plus. So there are alternatives in each individual category: portability, sequencer, MIDI connectivity, but ultimately it's going to come down to which controller do you want the most. What I wish for in the future would be something like an Akai Mpk Mini Pro. Probably still 25 keys, but give me the MIDI out functionality, give me the sequencer. I might even sacrifice 4 of these encoders to just give me better transport control. Play, stop, record, quantize, undo, and metronome on and off. Chef's kiss. And hey, take the onboard sound functionality from the MPK Mini Play, maybe pack that in here as well. Is that possible in a mini 25 key MIDI controller? I am not sure, but I would certainly pay more for a Pro MPK Mini that packs all those features in, and I think it's a logical step for Akai. So let me know what you all think in the comments. What do you think of the MPK Mini Plus? Will you be picking one up, checking it out? You'll probably see more with it from me on this channel, so if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, give this video a like. I do lots of live streams. I've got channel memberships if you want to support the channel and get access to our Discord community and members only content, and we've got a really fun community over here on this channel. So thank you all so much for watching. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.